I think in 2025, we finally acknowledged that sport has a problem. Kind of after months and years of athletes speaking directly to politicians on Parliament Hill about the abuse that they have been suffering, kind of consecutively at the end of 2024, government got a little bit serious. We didn't call an inquiry because that would require naming the people and the systems that are, and then holding them to accountability. But they tasked a commission. So that commission was supposed to report back in March of 2025, and instead asked for an extension because they had so much information to sift through and sort through. So the finality of that came kind of in August 28th when the commission released their preliminary report and recommendations. And that was kind of 2 weeks right after the 10-year sports strategy was dropped for that feel-good photo op. But really in that report, there was over 850 confirmations that sport was broken, that sport needed to be done differently, and that sport required a lot more support. So that was good. Next, the two things that were going to happen because of that, I think on both sides of the coin. Number one, we'll see a passive return to the status quo with the same people that have presided over the system for the last 10 years stepping up and saying, we got this, let us take it. Yeah, we take it seriously, and we'll do what we kind of always do and put the lipstick on a pig renovation, so to speak, for lack of better words. Remember, solutions would require the game to end for many, and the game cannot survive on solutions. So there are so many people and organizations that profit off of the continuity of status quo, off of the manifestation of chaos, that it's going to be really tough for somebody to reel it in. So I think that's going to be an issue. Or conversely, glass half full, the government's going to get the final report this year, and we're finally going to decide that sport is essential to our national way of life, a fabric for our communities, and we'll resource it from a human resource per side of the coin and a investment side of the coin accordingly. So number one, we finally acknowledge that sport has a problem. We can't begin to fix the problem that many have been saying unless we... Second thing that happened in 2025 in a big way is that private equity showed up. And, what the public sector can't and refuses to do, private equity will. Where that's a problem is been reflected in our public school system. So, complain. We don't have enough. Some justified, some not. Private gave way to the private school system and the bifurcation of education. That has gone similarly with sport and recreation and activity. So that's not a good thing. So what private equity will do is they'll come in and buy up broke sport organizations en masse. They'll look to put in an operator. They'll look to create some efficiencies and shared services, which is good. But the thing is, the eye will not be on the sports stakeholder as much as the eye will be on the company shareholder. So that is always the risk with private equity. Next, two things are going to happen because of that. Number one, they're going to demonstrate their effectiveness through that shared service and efficiency that the public sector has just refused to embrace, because that's the way we've always done things. Focus becomes on money, not on the values, variety of different reasons. Or secondly, and more worrisome, they'll do what all companies who get into that capitalistic growth mindset do, is that they forget to focus on their core consumer. And if you look at Lego and Nike and Under Armour over the past couple of years, they kind of started with that core focus and they were really disciplined, and then all of a sudden they got into doing a whole bunch of other things and forgetting what got them started, and now they're having to pivot and come back to find kind of that core competency, their hedgehog, so to speak. So private equity is here. They're showing up. They wouldn't have had to show up if we could have demonstrated that we had done things properly. And by we, I mean a lot of the current leadership presiding over the sports system. Somebody very famous and very accomplished in sports said that in order for sport to change, a lot of the people currently presiding over the system have to simultaneously disappear. He said it in different words, but we'll say it in those words. And if you're sitting out there wondering if that's you, well, then do a 360 degree feedback, or look at your attract, retain, and growth metrics, and you'll figure out if it's you or not. Third thing that happened in 2025 was that organizations that are currently in the system really doubled down on specialization as a means of retention. So we've moved to hoarding the participants in year-round play to keep that coveted registration fee and keep the lights on. And I understand it from a business perspective, from a human perspective. Some are going to make it through that hell, most aren't. And as parents, when you look at the elusive scholarship value, it diminishes for the majority because it gets consumed throughout that lead-up process, from showcases to traveling, camps, clinics, all the rest of the trimmings, and later on in rehab, extensive rehab. So you got to ask yourself, is this all worth it, or is this really a net zero at the end of the day? And the report back from the Future of Sport Commission has really shown that it's starting to become a net zero. Less people wanting to volunteer, less people wanting to officiate, less people wanting to get involved, and less people wanting to coach. So what this does when you double down on specializations as a mean of retention is it increases that bifurcation to participate, because you have the haves and the have-nots, like who can afford to go and do that and who can't. And are you really getting the best talent? And do you care if you get the best talent? As long as you kind of get those, what you've got, who cares what happens to the rest of the people, seems to be the undertones. Next, two things are going to happen. We're going to continue to let this happen and then essentially really compromise the participation end of the funnel for most sports. You're going to see some fringe sports just drop off. You're seeing that already. You're seeing the cracks that are starting to come through the ecosystem with universities, cutting varsity programs because, quite frankly, they just don't have the interest or the participation coming in. And it's not a philosophical argument; it's an economics line item. So, if we continue to let that happen, we're going to really decimate that participation, and sure, we'll have the, what's, for lack of better words, the those entertainment sports, football, soccer, kind of the big volleyball, basketball, the big sports, but even they are seeing some attrition. So it's going to be tough. Or number two, on glass half full, we're going to enact policies that in legislation that actually protects the health of the participants as they have in other countries. So clearly leaving it to ourselves and our own resources to figure this out and do what's right has been compromised by doing what makes money. We've, again, prioritize profits over people, and we're going to have to decide whether we want to protect that or not. On a positive note, we started to see things being done differently, and I'm really happy that people had both the courage and the forethought to do so. So non-traditional sports, things like flag football and pickleball, fun, inclusive, no policies for now, and very easy to implement. It was a miss, in my opinion, by football and tennis not to get on this earlier and weave it in to the part of the development pipeline. Football, because it's so big in America, can do that. The Olympic sports have glommed onto that, and we're going to see some interesting things coming from that. So it'll be good to watch. But that was one of the big things, kind of the non-traditional sports and adjustments to the traditional way of doing things. Second biggest thing is people started talking up. People from inside organizations. It's typical for sport people to get crushed on the way to the system. Everyone joins sport, they want to do something, and then you just get silenced and crushed, and if you speak out, you get blackballed. The total antithesis of what sports should be. That's at the highest level of sports. No wonder it's filtering and percolating down. But more people started speaking up, so that whole omerta started to go by the wayside, and people started demanding more accountability and better situations. We experienced this by our listening tour with one of our largest participation sports, and for the first time in some instances, the leadership of that organization actually went and sat down and listened to their members and invited very candid feedback. I'd say, again, like point number one, first of all, you can't solve a problem if you're not unwilling to acknowledge it. We finally did that. You can't come to solutions and shared solutions without listening. So we're finally seeing some good examples of that. And I think that's going to be a really good way to go forward. Otherwise, you're going to see new models that start popping up outside the system. And we saw that too, which is great. We saw LSOs leaving PSOs and just doing their own thing. They're not interested in more policies and procedures. They're interested in the people and the product. You see PSOs kind of having reached their end with their NSO. Again, for the 98% who don't care about being seen or making it to the pros, you're seeing these new models and new alternatives pop up. Top Sports is something that comes, a group out of Toronto, providing multi-sport opportunities for families and kids who understand the value of sports and just didn't like where it was going. And it's not like their Johnny or Jenny cannot eventually go up a level, but that's not where they want to start it at age 7, 8, 9, and 10. So I think that was it's very good to see. Personally, the summits, the sports summits, I've talked about it ad nausea. Those warm shower summits where a new group comes in every year and they get sold this is the way sports should run and here are all the problems and we're going to sell you our solutions, and to the professionalization through airfare, through registration fees, through hotels, through eating, through come in and get drunk on a Saturday night. We're going to spray a whole bunch of information on you that you're not going to remember on Monday. Really good to see some examples of that being done differently. International Youth Sport Leaders Group, their lead summits, completely different, completely relevant, completely supportive, and exactly what the sports system needs. So it's really good to see all of those things happen simultaneously. Next, two things are going to happen. The old structure is going to have to pivot based on these new innovations and disruptions and adopt what they should have had years ago, and that's going to be positive. And, these new entities and ways to create a totally new system that makes the old system obsolete. That's what's going to happen. So one of these entities is going to hit the ball out of the park, so to speak, and it's going to become that focus of how more sports should be done at the kind of local, regional, provincial, and national level. And that's great because, as Buckminster Fuller said, to change something, you don't fight the existing reality, you build a new reality that makes the existing one obsolete. And I think we're seeing that. What's good for FSQ coming up in 2026? We had a really good year of really digging into some of these issues and helping people see where the solutions are at a local, regional, provincial, national, and even international level. At all three phases. What we're good at is taking really complicated things and distilling them into bite-sized pieces so that they can be utilized and people can see themselves in that. And we prefer to co-create rather than saying, here's the solution, now you go do it. It might not be that solution for that organization who's a rural versus that organization who's downtown or in a bigger situation. So I think we've been flexible. We're not going to continue to try to push solutions through the existing framework. It's not working. It doesn't work. You've got people there that are reluctant to the ideas, or they just have their own strategic plan in their own direction and they think they know what to do best there. We are going to start democratizing this information and working with like-minded people so that we can actually help sport organizations thrive in the areas that they need the most help. So again, a la carte, again, pairing the right people and groups with the right organizations to create the right solutions. Again, that'll be a blend of high touch and high tech. It's not one or the other, it's both. And again, working with organizations and people that are really, they can get past themselves. They don't have to control everything. That is the sports system. It's often led by people who were in sports. They're competitive. They got egos. They're not willing to listen and learn and do the things that we advocate as coaches and leaders that we do in sport. So 2026 is going to be a big year for us. We've been building to this for the last 2 to 3 years, really refining, testing, And now we are going to get going. So you can expect to see some big things from us to the sports system for North America and beyond.